Hello again, everybody, and great to see you back here on another edition of Pit Stop. Tonight, we're changing our format just a little bit because we have two very special guests, Formula One columnist Gerald Donaldson and Formula Atlantic driver Lee Bentham. But first off, what we have is a report from IMSA as they've released the accident report from Road Atlanta on April 30th. Remember that bad crash with Fabrizio Barbazza and our own Jeremy Dale, as well as the separate incident involving Steve Millan. So, reading right from the IMSA report, the findings after a review of reports and videotapes, IMSA officials have reached the conclusion that both incidents are best classified as racing accidents occurring during normal racing conditions. Furthermore, emergency personnel at the scene responded and handled both of the accidents in an appropriate and professional manner. Actions that IMSA plans to take: the review of both accidents has prompted some changes for future IMSA events. They are as follow. To more quickly communicate yellow flag conditions, a yellow warning light system will be installed in turn 12 at Road Atlanta. Each driver, whether Exxon World Sports Car or Exxon Supreme GT, is required to demonstrate his or her ability to achieve representative lap times. All Exxon World Sports Cars must start the race on the same tires used during qualifying. This is designed to prevent the artificial skewing of qualifying standards. All Exxon World Sports Cars must run with headlights turned on during combined World Sports Car and Exxon Supreme GT combined sessions, practice and races. All Exxon Supreme GT cars must carry a class delineation decal, GTS-1 or GTS-2, on the rear of the car. Severe penalties will be imposed on drivers failing to attend mandatory event driver briefings, and all IMSA rapid response doctors will wear visible name identification and medical armbands. With the exception of item number 1, to be implemented by the 96 season, all changes are effective immediately, and of course that was from that Road Atlanta crash that has Jeremy Dale, Fabrizio Barbazza, and Steve Millan well on the road to recovery. Well, as far as local stuff is concerned, we have some recaps for you. Normally we go through them in a little bit more extensive fashion, but tonight we're just going to show you the race orders and the points. Ron Fellows came from a 20th starting spot due to a wet qualifying session to win the race. With a second place finish, Tom Kendall still has the points lead. Ron Fellows is in second now. At the motorsport Speedway, Ken Donaldson won the feature, but Richie Minette still has the points lead. In the street stock class, Graham Brown finally got the feature win that he was looking for, and now he's on top of the points as well. Late model sportsmen's Dwight Brown took the honors for the feature. Alex Hamilton is still the points leader. Final feature of the night, the super late models. Jeff Hanley leads the points, and guess what? Jeff Hanley also won the feature. Well, let's move right along to our segments with our guests. First up, a special guest right here in the studio with us is Lee Bentham, driver of the number 91 in the Players Limited Toyota Atlantic Series. And welcome to the set, Lee. You're our first guest here in the studio for this season, and I just want to welcome you.
Thanks, Glenn.
Now, we'll get to the Atlantic stuff in a moment. You finished 5th in Montreal, and we'll be talking about that. But first off, when did this all start for you?
Started in 1980, actually. My father got me interested in karts. He had been racing stock cars for a few years, and we went to the track a few times, and we ended up buying a kart, and ever since then I've been racing. Yeah,
and I can't lie. I've shared some paddocks with you, so I know a little bit about you. But what I don't know is you've been off to Europe. Maybe you can tell us about your karting exploits there.
Yeah, we've gone over to Europe 5 times for the World Championships of karting. Over in Europe, the karting is taken very seriously, very professionally. It's not so much of a family sport over there as it is very professional and big business.
Yeah, no doubt. Now you've got the karting stuff behind you now, and you're going to move along. And next up was some showroom stock, a brief stint in a Suzuki Swift, now a Camaro, and you still have that Camaro.
That's right. We still run the NTN Bearings Camaro. We've had support from them for about 3 years now. And they wanted to go to something a little more upscale. They already have a Busch Grand National car and a CAS car, and they wanted to get into something in the open wheel field, so we decided to go Formula Atlantic racing.
And that brings us right to it. Montreal was your very first race, 5th overall, and when I got that result in off the fax machine, you can think that, well, fifth, okay, big deal. You know, sometimes you see fifth place and the person's down a couple laps and what have you. But when I looked at yours, what I was looking at too was the fact that you were on the lead lap, and as far as the second to fourth goes, your times are right in there. Empringham, I believe, had a second on the rest of yous, but that was a great run. Maybe you can tell us about your whole weekend there in Montreal, your first debut with the Atlantic cars.
Previous to that race, I'd only had probably about 100 laps in the car. The first day we went, we had some handling problems. And again, there's a lot of work we had to do with just myself gelling with the team, getting to know the team, and likewise them getting to know my driving style and my preferences. So we had a bit of trouble during qualifying. We ended up qualifying 13th. And then we worked on the car that night, talked a lot about it, and we ended up with a really great car for the run on Saturday, and ended up pulling it into fifth.
You didn't really know going into the race then what kind of a setup you had.
Yeah, it was a different beast from what we had in the qualifying, but fortunately it worked. It was about 2.5 seconds quicker.
Wow,
so.
You really picked up a lot of time overnight.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, as far as yourself, did you get comfortable right off the bat, or did it take until race time and even through the race until you were getting comfortable with the race conditions in Atlantics?
Basically, the first lap was getting used to the way the car was handling and everything, and the rest just sort of fell into place.
Can you just maybe describe a lap or so in the wheel of an Atlantic car? You know, a lot of us have never gotten anywhere near that and probably never will.
Physically, the Atlantic car it batters you in the cockpit. There's not much room to move. It's very physically demanding to drive. You have heat, sometimes up to 3 Gs in the cockpit, cornering speeds. It's very bumpy, and the laps go by very quickly. I mean, it's a very fast car.
Certainly not the showroom stock Camaro, is it?
No, definitely not.
Now, as far as the rest of the plans for this year go with the Atlantic racing, what do you intend to do?
We intend to do all of the Canadian races. So we'll be downtown at the Toronto Molson Indy. We will be at a doubleheader weekend in Three Rivers, and the Vancouver Indy as well.
Wow, so you're getting a good portion of the last half of the schedule in.
Mm-hmm.
Has anybody helped you out, you know, particularly at Montreal being your first race, as far as other drivers?
I had a few pointers from David Empringham previous, just as to what to expect when I first got into one of the cars, but other than that, I just drove by the seat of my pants and figured it out.
Now, how would you compare that car, though, versus a go-kart versus a Camaro? Let's compare it to the go-kart, because you actually told me that it was very similar in some fashions to karting.
They are. Physically, they're very much like a kart. The speed is all very relative. You're going a lot faster, I mean upwards of 150 miles an hour, but everything is relative because of the handling and the braking, and it's a lot like a kart because basically you can drive to your fullest and the car will accept that. When you're racing a Camaro, sometimes you have to drive to the limits of the car as opposed to the limits of yourself. So.
Right, especially when you're talking a showroom stock.
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
So you really found that adjustment actually quite nice.
Yeah, it's a lot more along the lines of what I'm used to, and I think that helped a lot. I mean, 12 years in karting, I think that's the best schooling you can get.
Well, I think you're proof positive that karting is good training ground. What about the future next year as far as this team is concerned and your sponsorship with NTN?
Based on the finishes that we accomplished this year, I think NTN Bearings' interests should carry on into next year, maybe for a full season. That's what we're looking forward to. Right now, we'll see how it goes. Well,
everybody must be ecstatic over your debut in Montreal with them, and that certainly lends itself towards getting perhaps a full-time ride for the 96 season. It must be tough financially.
It is. It takes a lot of people, a lot of help, and a lot of sponsorship. But NTN Bearings has been great. TMI Racing as well, Dave Godby, he's helped out a lot, and P1 Racing, they're all great. They're fantastic. They've helped me with the steep learning curve in in getting used to the car, and I think we got good chances in Toronto.
Great. Well, all the best in Toronto, and we will be there as well, so we're going to catch up with you in Toronto and follow you right through the weekend. Thanks for coming in today, and again, wish you all the best for the rest of the season in the Atlantic car.
Thank you.
All right, that's Lee Bentham driving the number 91 in the Players Limited Toyota Atlantic Championships. Up next, we have Formula One columnist Gerald Donaldson to be here with an interview. Actually, we interviewed him out in the park, but nonetheless, we'll have that in just a moment.
If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions about your community channel, Rogers Community 10, please call the Rogers Response Line at 436-3500.
Welcome back to Pit Stop. Gerald Donaldson is a world-renowned Formula One columnist and author, and today we spoke with him. Let's just have that interview right now.
It all started in motorsport many years ago when the circuit first opened. I used to go with my brother to watch the sports car racing and became a fan, a huge fan, and made it my goal to somehow to get more closely involved. And in 1977, I persuaded a Canadian magazine that they should do a story on Walter Wolf, a Canadian businessman who had his own Formula One team. So I went over to the British Grand Prix, and it so happened in that race, this was 1977, Gilles Villeneuve made his debut. And I followed on from there and did more and more Formula One reporting.
And you've done some television work as well, and all of this was from that 1977.
Yes, well, the seeds were sown earlier from watching the races. I did a bit of amateur racing too, but... Yes?
What kind of racing were you doing?
I started out in an old frog-eyed Sprite at Harewood Acres. An old wreck of a car, but it went around and round. Then I had a Honda S600, a tiny little sports car. A lot of fun, 600cc motorcycle engine, 14,000 RPM. And then I had a Formula Ford.
So the bug was actually in you from that point on.
Yes, yeah. And it also taught me that I could never be a professional racing driver.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm glad that you're writing because you sure do an excellent job of it. I don't miss your column in the wheel section, that's for sure. But this was your last book, James Hunt. And can you maybe just tell us a little bit about this one, since this is your last experience?
Yes, that book came about. I remember in probably 1989 or 1990, I'd just done a biography of Gilles Villeneuve, which was highly praised, and James Hunt came up to me, and I was so flattered. He thanked me for writing this book because he liked it. He said, "What's your next book?" And I said, "Well, how about the Hunt memoirs?" And he said, "Oh, no, I'd rather not write that. Upset a lot of people, I would rather not do it." But he said, "Why don't you and I work together in a newspaper column?" So I did for 3 or 4 years, worked with him on an internationally syndicated Formula One column. And then, of course, he died unexpectedly of a heart attack, and I wrote his biography.
Before that, just before this one, actually, you've done a little bit of writing here, haven't you? Just grabbed the other book as well, Grand Prix People. And I just want to hold this one up and sort of take this as our lead into just asking you about the state of Formula One and what you think about it and where it's going.
In fact, recently I've done an article on the future of Formula One racing. I interviewed a lot of the people who will decide where it is going, including the president of the FIA, Max Mosley, and Bernie Ecclestone, who is the financial guru of the sport. A few conclusions they can tell us at this stage. First of all, there will be a lot more Formula One racing in the Far East. There will be a Chinese Grand Prix, perhaps even in 1996 or 7. There's a lot of interest there in the sport. There's probably going to be a Singapore Grand Prix. There could be 3 or 4 of them in Japan. There's a huge interest there. So geographically, it will shift. And of course, they'd love to have an American Grand Prix again because they need it for the American market, Formula One being very much a marketing exercise where the sponsors want the television exposure. Technologically, they're going to try to keep the lid on the technology not interfering with the driving. They want the driver still to be in charge, not the way it was a couple of years ago when it was almost a computer sport. The engine formula will probably stay at 3 liters as it is now until the end of the century, the year 2000, when they may go to 2 liters because they feel that this is the trend in civilian cars, automobiles will have smaller capacity engines but higher performance. Other than that, it will stay much as it is now.
Do you think the drivers like these automatic transmissions, this push-button stuff? I mean, look what happened to Schumacher in Montreal.
Yes, it cost him the win, but I've spoken to a few of the drivers. In fact, the most recent one was Mika Hakkinen about this very subject, because he's a driver of the old school. He loves speed, and he was brought up gear shifting and clutching and so on, but he explained that he much prefers this, because the whole idea of being a racing driver, a Formula One driver, is speed. And you can do everything so much more quickly now with the, everything you need to do is on the steering wheel. Changing gears, steering, all you need to do is keep your foot to the floor and occasionally on the brake if you feel it necessary, which he doesn't often. So he gets great pleasure in this new technology that helps him drive faster, really. So he feels the good old days were not necessarily the good old days. They're here now.
They're getting much greater enjoyment, more speed now.
Yeah.
And of course, fast is never fast enough, right?
That's it, that's it.
What about the driver themselves? Are they becoming more of, I don't know, a technologically advanced person? There's some stories, even in your book about Gilles Villeneuve, these rebels of the old day and carefree and smoking and everything else.
No question about the modern Formula One driver has to keep his nose to the grindstone to a much greater degree than ever before. And some of them resent that. Some of them would like to be fooling around, enjoying their social lives more. But interestingly, Gerhard Berger told me recently that he's been through all this. He's been around a while. He's the veteran driver now. He doesn't mind all the work that's necessary now because it's helping him become a better driver. They have endless debriefings where they have to replay everything they've done in their heads. They have to communicate with the engineers, and they have to be much more sensitive with the car to drive it and to interpret it. So for a really enthusiastic driver, these times are okay.
As far as you mentioned the story before about a new James Hunt fan and the reason for it.
Yes, Mika Salo is quite a good character. He's entertaining. The latest flying Finn in the sport, carrying on the tradition of Keke Rosberg, who was the original one in Formula One racing. And I asked him in a recent interview, in fact it was at Monaco at the Grand Prix, do you have any Formula One heroes? And he said, no, not really. He said, but I think I've got one now. And I said, who is it? He said, James Hunt. And it turned out he had read my James Hunt book, and I said, well, why is he your hero now? He said, because he smoked, drank, and chased women.
And that's the old racer, but nowadays it's now the corporate racer.
Yes, exactly.
But do you find that the Formula One drivers and the teams are less accessible than going down to the Toronto Molson Indy and getting autographs? Is that, have they got this snobbish approach to racing?
Not necessarily snobbish. It's out of necessity. At some races, Grand Prix races in Europe, there are 1,500 accredited journalists. And you've got 26 drivers, 24 now. I don't know what the ratio is, but it's out of all proportion. So these people are besieged by media people, and they just have to ask them to back off. They can't talk to everybody. It's not that they're necessarily snobbish, because one thing I found, especially in writing that Grand Prix People book, that they're all enthusiasts, they're all racers, and they'd love to sit and talk for hours about it, but they can't. They're just too busy. So it's not that the Formula One people are any more snobbish than the IndyCar people. It's just that the pressures of the media make it that they have to be standoffish.
Yeah, I think that's what we have around here then. Well, what about Montreal? What can you tell us about the Montreal Grand Prix since we just came back from there?
Well, it was a huge success in the end. The race itself had been, frankly, a bit of a bore. Although I always say when people say Formula One racing is a bore, well, all you need to do is put one Formula One car on an interesting track, and that's enough for me. Just watching it and listening to it go around is perfect. But the race was processional. There wasn't much going on. And then until Michael Schumacher had his mechanical problem, which enabled John Alesi to win, and it was phenomenal. He was congratulated by everybody, even Schumacher, because Alesi is very popular. He's a decent guy, but also he drives with flair. He's all arms and elbows, helmet. You can see him enjoying himself in the car. And even the people in Formula One racing can see this, and they like him for it. Plus he drives number 27 Ferrari, which is a number made famous by Gilles Villeneuve, and it was on the Gilles Villeneuve circuit in the number 27 Ferrari on Lazy's 31st birthday, and that win enabled Ferrari to become the most successful ever Formula One team, 105 wins.
Right. So, in all, it was really a great success when you take a look at all that. I think fans maybe expect to see too much racing. One thing I like to tell people is don't just watch the car. Watch what the car is doing. Watch the driver and how the car is reacting to see if he's changing his lines. There's a lot to enjoy a race, for sure.
Interestingly, at this race, I was sitting next to a journalist who normally covers IndyCar racing, Dan Proudfoot of the Toronto Sun. And I asked him what he thought, because he spent a lot of time out on the circuit, as I did as well. He said, you know, these cars are fascinating to watch. They're much more exciting than Indy cars, because they're actually being thrown around. This year, with the new rule changes, they've lost 30% of downforce. They're much more twitchy. You see opposite lock power slides, the tail being flipped out, and the guys are really working in the cockpit. So they're spectacular to watch, much more than they had been since, say, the 1970s. When you had great heroes like Ronnie Peterson and Jochen Rindt, who were sideways all the time.
Mentioning heroes, let's move this into Canadian soil and talk about the state of Canadian racing. We have a lot of great drivers, Formula Atlantic, David Ambringham, Patrick Capage, who had some interviews with Formula One people in Montreal. Lee Bentham in his inaugural race finishing 5th in Montreal. What do you have to say about Canadian racing?
I think proportion to our population, we surely must be one of the most successful road racing country in the world, producing these guys as we do. And lots of people speculate, well, why should this be? We have Jacques Villeneuve, Paul Tracy, Scott Goodyear, the people you mentioned. I think it's perhaps something to do with the Canadian character. We're noted for hard work and suffering through adversity because of our awful winters. And I think we just try harder as people and as racing drivers. That's partly it. But also, all of these guys are following in the footsteps of Gilles Villeneuve, who set the trend.
Yeah, absolutely.
And has inspired so many drivers since.
You get the opportunity around the world to see some support races. Do you think that there's something we need to try and develop here in Canada, or are you happy with the kind of racing we have at Shoreham Stock and the Formula 1600 series?
I don't think we have enough. In Britain, for instance, which has 56 million people, say approximately 2 times what we have in Canada, in a tiny area, which probably much less than the province of Ontario, I'm not sure what geographical size, but they have 18 racing circuits in the British Isles. 345 race meetings every year. So there's a farm system built in. I don't know how many thousands of racing drivers they can have. But this goes back also to the mentality of the nation. In Europe, Britain, Europe, Latin America, there's a racing tradition, which, as an offshoot of that, there's a mentality amongst sponsors to sponsor racing drivers and cars and teams, which doesn't exist in Canada or even North America to the same degree. So the young drivers can't get their leg up that way.
Yeah, I think, should be proud of the fact that we've got some drivers doing quite well in IndyCar and Atlantis in North America. And Allenberg in Mexico doing very well, yes. And there's a guy that doesn't get very much recognition, Jeremy Gale, on his way to recovery after the World Sports Car crash.
Yes.
But considering we don't have that many racing venues to go to, we've done pretty good.
It's remarkable, really. And that's testimony to these guys, how hard they try, how willing to persevere they are, because they've all had to fight to get where they are.
Heroes. Gilles Villeneuve, your first book. I don't believe that this gentleman has enough recognition in Canada, comparing it around the world, and I guess you're the one that can really tell us how true that may be.
I'm glad to see that the recognition factor is improving in Canada, largely because of the success of his son. But it's true that in Europe, worshipped is hardly too strong a word. The subtitle of this book is The Life of a Legendary Racing Driver. Well, he is a legend, unquestionably. There are statues and monuments to him. And when you go to, say, the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, or the San Marino Grand Prix at Imola, where there are acres and acres of stands selling regalia and souvenirs, still, the most prevalent material is Gilles Villeneuve stuff. Italian men buy for little racing suits for their little boys, this high. Gilles Villeneuve on his suit. Photos, replicas of his helmet, all manner of material.
Trying to find a T-shirt here.
Yes. Now, it also should be noted that since Ayrton Senna's death, I would say that two of these guys are running close in terms of nostalgia and memory in Europe and the rest of the world. Because Senna was a huge hero.
Absolutely. Do you think that we are going to see maybe more people pay attention to the legacy of Gilles Villeneuve and maybe start to treat some of our other Canadian drivers with some respect since Jacques won with the Indianapolis 500s?
Unquestionably, that's happened already. The family name is once again in the forefront. It's in the public eye. But no matter what happens, it's the Canadian way, I think, not to heroize these people to the same extent that they do in other countries in Europe, where motorsport is so deeply ingrained. Well, it's not just motorsport. Even our huge hockey heroes here are probably bigger heroes in America than Canadians would allow them to be here. I'm sure Gretzky is more of a hero in L.A. than he was in Edmonton. I mean, people are not afraid to hero worship in other countries. Canadians are more reticent about it.
I think your story is an amazing one. All that you have within you, and I certainly hope that maybe down the road as the season progresses, we get a chance to meet up with you again and talk some more, because certainly there's a lot more stories that you could tell us, and more about Gilles Villeneuve, maybe some stories that you could tell us about himself. Interesting question, actually. Are you interested in pursuing a book about Jacques Villeneuve?
At some stage, I think I would like to. The reason is, for a biographer especially, you need a colorful, entertaining, charismatic personality. And I've just recently met Jacques for the first time. I've spoken to him many times, but gotten to know him. And I can see where he is a real character. He's tremendous charisma. He's very much like his father. But he's also slightly eccentric, which is attractive to a writer. So yeah, I think I would like to do that.
Well, I think your name should be down with the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame if it's not already. And really appreciate your time again, Gerald, that you've taken with us today. Hopefully we can meet up again as the season progresses.
I'd love to do it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our thanks to Gerald Donaldson and Lee Bentham for joining us tonight. This weekend we have the Indy Cars and Indy Lights at Portland International Raceway. IMSA is at Watkins Glen, and of course Motorsport International Speedway will be having their races at 6:30 Saturday night. That's it for now. Until next week on Pit Stop, take care, have a great week and a safe one.